Hello, I'm Nicola from Daisy and Grace, and today's tutorial is regarding my shallow triangle. What's a shallow triangle, I hear you say? This is my shallow triangle template. This is the instructions, and can you see that amazing three-dimensional almost pinwheel? That is what you can make using the shallow triangle. But also it goes in my 7-inch QAYG triangle and it makes an amazing quilt. But first of all, here is a hexagon made from a shallow triangle. So 6 triangles make a hexagon. So this has been made out of, I can't do the maths, a lot of shallow triangles, but you can imagine a quilt out of all of those would be amazing. And I have actually sewn this one by hand, because you can either sew it by hand or by machine. Now this is something you can create just using the shallow triangle template, but if you were to also pair it with the 7-inch triangle, you can create a quilt like this. So this isn't finished, but can you see how wonderful it is? And this, you don't have to worry about the points matching. So there we go, there's one side and there is the other side. So a beautiful quilt in the making. It's getting there. But that's the beauty of Quilt as You Go, because this works just as a little table runner, but I can make this into a big quilt too. It's up to you. So how does my shallow triangle template work? Well, let's put this aside, grab the templates, and I'll show you how it's done. So here is my shallow triangle template. And see, it has 3 holes and it has score lines that are 1/4 of an inch inside. Now to make your triangle, you need 3 shallow triangles. So I've chosen these 3 fabrics here for this one. And what you need to do is turn them over. Better put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. So turn them over so the wrong sides are facing up. And you take your template and you place that on top of your fabric, and through those holes you're going to position, or you're going to mark with a pencil, beg my pardon, mark with a pencil those dots. So there's one done. I'm going to do all 3, because if you overthink it and try and think which bits you're going to sew to which, it gets a bit complicated, and actually it's just as easy to mark all 3 really. So I'm going to pop that back on and mark my dots like so. Now when I turn these over, you can see this is going to be a pesky Y seam. So we're going to join them like this, and this is your Y seam. This is a pesky Y seam, but it's not so hard with this template, because you're going to use the dots to sew dot to dot, and it will create this Y seam without an issue. So what we're going to do, I'm also going to show you, if you want to do this by hand, you can use your template, match that score line up to the edge, and then just draw dot to dot with your pencil, and then you can sew dot to dot by hand. But this one I'm going to sew by machine. So I'm going to get my pins, and I am going to be sewing this one to this, and I'll put right sides together, and I'm going to pop a couple of pins in there, and on the sewing machine I'm going to sew from that dot there to that dot there. So let's pop that underneath, and I'm going to pop the needle down in that first hole, and I'm going to, I've put a stay stitch on my sewing machine, so I'm going to start sewing, and I'm going to sew all the way along to the other dot, and when I get the needle into that other dot, I'm going to do a stay stitch. Then I am going to show you that I have, so I'm using black thread. Now you would use a thread that matches the fabric, or like a light grey thread, which is my go-to when I'm sewing multiple colours together. But I've sewn from that dot to that dot only. So now if I open that up, we've got to get this into here, into this Y seam. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put right side of this piece and then right side of that piece. I'm going to position that in place. I'm going to pop a pin at the beginning, and then I'm just going to finger press that seam a little so that we can line this end up, and then we're going to take this to the sewing machine and sew dot to dot again. So back to the sewing machine, get the needle in the position it needs to be to start, and we are going to start, take that pin out as we go, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to stop when it gets to that dot there. I'm going to do a stay stitch. Ooh, and my thread's not cut this time. So take that out, trim my thread. So now we've sewn this bit to this bit, we've got this one to sew. So again, I'm going to put right sides together, match this corner up, and I'll pop a pin in there, and then I'm going to just move that out of the way, and we're going to pop a pin in there, and we're going to do the same again. We're going to do dot to dot sewing. So here we go, under the sewing machine, last time, needle in that dot, and let's start our sewing to the other. Now as we're getting close to that pin, I take that out, and as we get to the last dot, we want to do a stay stitch, and we take it out, and we've nearly got a shallow triangle. So I need to bring in my pressing mat, and I'm going to show you how this presses up. So get my iron. I'm going to open this out. Well, actually, first I'm not. I'm going to just press those seams so that they're nice and it just makes your work a little bit more professional if you do press your seams first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pressing the seams away. So this one I'm pressing this side like that. I'm going to turn it round, and I'm going to press this seam towards there. And I'm not going into the centre yet. There's a reason why. And then I'm going to press this one that way. Now in the centre, all these seams open out to form a little hexagon, which keeps the bulk away from that centre. So I think if I were to lift this up, you might be able to see it a little bit better. But it creates this lovely little hexagon in the middle. Now if I turn that over, look at that. A Y seam to die for. It's perfect. So perfect. So now what we need to do, I'm going to put this into my Quilt As You Go triangle. But this, because this has been made so that you can hand sew these together, this has still got seam allowance on the outside edge. So I'm just grabbing the inside of my triangle and I'm going to place that on top and trim those seam allowances off. So I'm going to stand up for this and just trim that edge off. I'm going to turn it, line that up again. There we go. Cut it, trim it up, turn it, and do the last edge. Now I'm always cutting away from myself as well. So let's move all those scrappy seam allowances out of the way. Now we're going to, I've already pre-cut a large triangle from the outer triangle, can't see that there, and I've also cut the inside triangle in wadding. Now how do we do the quilt as you go? It's really nice and easy. We turn the backing fabric over so the wrong side is facing us, and it's only just about gets into the screen because it's so large, and then we place the outer template on top. Now because we haven't got that inner triangle in there, that gives us the recess to be able to position our inner triangle dead in the center. And this is the beauty of these templates. It gives you the perfect binding as you go round your triangle. So then we position our shallow triangle on top and we take some pins. So because this is rather a large template, I am going to put a few pins in to secure it. Once that's pinned and all ready, you can take that large triangle off and put that aside. So how do we do the quilt as you go? So first things first, you start with one edge and you fold that edge in to meet the inner triangle like that, and you finger press that in place, and then you fold over again so that the edge of your inner triangle is this edge here, and we pop a few pins in there, and then we go on to the next edge. So we move the triangle around. Now when I'm doing this by machine, I like to pin it all in place first so I can do all the machining all in one go. Now I finger press this edge down because we're going to fold over that edge on top of that folded edge there, and I'm going to finger press down here, and again we're going to roll that back onto the top like that. Now you might be able to see we've got a little pesky point here, but we're going to come back to that. I'm just going to carry on and roll that binding over and pin it in place. These pins are great because you can actually press over them, so you don't need to take your pins out as you're pressing your triangle. So I'm going to come back to this pesky point. You can see it's got a dog tail. What you're going to do is fold that back on itself so that that matches the line of this triangle here, and then you're going to press that with your finger and get that really pressed in place. Then when you let it go, you've got a little press line. When you fold it in on itself, you get a perfect point. So they're not that pesky. The first time you do it, they feel a bit pesky. After that, you're fine. So we go to the next edge. Again, I'm going to finger press that edge down because we're going to fold that on top. And we're going to oh, I've got a bit of fluff there. Let's get rid of that. Fold that over to meet the inside edge. and then we're going to roll it back on top of itself. Again, we've got another pesky point that end, but we've also got one the other end. So I'm just going to carry on folding over my bindings and pinning it in place. Now this pin's going to get in the way, so I'm going to take that one out now because it's all secure. And then when I get to this end, I just fold the binding over and we'll come back to this pesky point. I'll pop a pin in there. I'm going to come back to this one. Same as the last one, so fold that back on itself so that it matches the line of the triangle there. Pop it in on itself, fold it back. Got a perfect point. A little pin in there. And then we're going to do this, there's always one point that's going the opposite way to you that you normally do it, and that's always a bit troublesome. So I've I actually scored with my now on this one. It's another way you can do it. And then you fold that in, and hey presto, you've got your point. I'm going to pop a pin in that. Like that. I'm going to take the central pins out because we don't need those now. I'm going to bring my pressing mat back in, and I'm going to give this a press before I sew it. Now the reason I do this is it gives me a nice, really crisp fold on that fabric, so that when you're sewing it, you know exactly where you're sewing and you can see it. Before I pressed it, it was a bit bouncy, and it just makes it so much easier to sew if you give it a quick little press. So back with my iron, back with my ironing board, and let's go to the sewing machine. So I am not going to start on the very end of the triangle. I'm going to come in as slightly in a bit. So actually I'm going to start here. Where that folds over, I'm going to start here sewing, just because these points can be quite bulky and sometimes your sewing machine doesn't like it. So I'm going to pop my piece under there and I'm going to start sewing, and I'm sewing as close to the edge as you feel comfortable to sew. About 1/8 of an inch is perfect. And what I'm doing, I'm taking those pins out as I go. So each time I come up to a pin, I just take that out. Now, when I'm getting up to this corner, I want to stop when the pin goes into the other binding. I'm going to turn it round and take my pin out and sew to the edge like that. Then I'm going to turn it back again, so we're coming down this edge so it's in the right position. Start sewing, pin out again. It's quite funny, when these are all pinned they look a bit like a voodoo doll with all their pins sticking out. But don't forget to take the pins out as you sew. And we're coming down to the next one. I've got a cheeky little pin in there that I don't need, so I'll take that out. Again, I'm coming along, and when I get that needle into the this binding, I'm going to turn it round and start sewing. Take that pin out. I'm just using that pin to guide the fabric in there. Turn it back on itself, and we're coming down the last stretch. So I'm coming down all the way down, and we're on the home stretch. Now we're going, this is going to go stitch right to the end. Now if I bring this here, I'm going to just trim my threads off here on the back. Here we go. So I've obviously stitched this in black so that you might be able to see it a little bit better, but I would normally stitch this in the same colour as the binding or something as near as, or like I said earlier, a light grey is very forgiving on a lot of fabrics. That's the front side. There's the back side where my stitch line is. This is one quilt. So this is your little finished shallow triangle in a 7-inch Quilt As You Go triangle that I can add into my beautiful quilt. And it's as simple as that, and it's so much fun. But until next time, well, I hope you've enjoyed this little tutorial, and until next time, bye bye for now.